Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. My name's Jon Myer, Partner Solutions Architect underneath the Cloud Management Tools. And I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us for Closing the Skills Gap, leveraging automation to attract, retain, and magnify the effectiveness of highly skilled resources. And I'd like to open it up with a little bit of an introduction. According to leading researchers, nearly 80% of IT decision makers say their teams lack the skills they need. And this is challenging, in particular when it comes to cloud computing. In fact, a report from 451 Research indicates that cloud skills gaps have nearly doubled in the past 3 years, with 90% of organizations reporting shortages. These statistics come as no surprise to business leaders around the world who are struggling to find talented developers, architects, business leaders to help them make the most of cloud. There's simply not enough highly experienced and on-demand applicants to meet this demand. How does an industry suddenly create a large number of highly qualified cloud professionals with 15 plus years of experience? It doesn't. Instead, business need to rethink who they hire, how they train, and most importantly, the effective tooling they use. By leveraging cloud automation tooling, it magnifies the effectiveness of those highly skilled resources. Now, at this time, I'd like to introduce David Boeke, Turbot CTO of VP of Services, to discuss how automation tooling removes the repetitive drudgery from day-to-day cloud operations and activity. David, you're on mute.
Mute. Now I'm on mute. Thanks
there you go, David.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll share my desktop. Good morning or afternoon to wherever you are right now. Thank you very much for joining and attending this webinar today. As John was talking about, we're going to talk a little bit about closing the IT skills gap. I'm going to give you some perspective. I was previously led IT architecture, technology architecture at a Fortune 100 company. We built many years ago now, 10 years ago now, a cloud operations team and started moving workloads to the cloud and moving enterprise workloads to the cloud. About 4 years ago, I left that and joined Turbot and have been, and now I'm very lucky that I get to work with many enterprises across the board that are looking at how they can go out to services like Amazon and Amazon Web Services and move their data center operations to those. And what are then the challenges that they have in skilling up their teams in order to manage that effectively? So that's what we're going to talk about today. What I'd like to do is just get started and talk a little bit about, why this is happening. It wasn't coincidental that Amazon launched in 2006, and then, or AWS launched in 2006, and then immediately after the iPhone released in 2007, that both of those technologies have kind of grown up and grown larger together. The change to having everyone having essentially a computer in their pocket and having apps on demand has changed the demand cycle that we need from IT. The digital engagement aspect of, hey, every bank in the world now has an iPhone app, an Android app, et cetera, that they deploy to their customers. And the services that need to be running 24/7 behind the scenes, globally in order to support those customers and do that are, directly related to the growth that we've seen in the cloud space. In addition to that, in addition to the demand and the changing demand that we now have that on technology from having that kind of phone with us all the time, we've also discovered new ways to get insights from data. So we've powered the use of big data systems, compute infrastructure, large data sets to be able to start understanding and knowing more about our business and being able to use that data to direct the strategy of the business. That's been a fundamental shift over that same decade, going from kind of a black science that people did when they were releasing doing research and doing clinical studies and things like that, to actually using those same techniques, the same data analysis techniques to actually run and manage and develop strategy. And then the other aspect of that is just business agility in general. I know that we moved at my previous employer, we moved from having when we had our on-premise data centers, taking about 8 weeks from a customer request, from a business team request, to deploy a VM within our data center. And that was with the virtual infrastructure racked and stacked and ready to go. It took 8 weeks of process and delivery in order to get that, right? And people quickly discovered that they could go out, they could swipe a credit card within AWS, they could get an account, and they could have a VM spun up in 5 to 10 minutes. It was a huge business agility adjustment. In addition to like starting stuff, you can also bring it down, right? So if I can quickly do a POC, and if that POC isn't successful, I can essentially pull the plug on it, reducing my IT expenditure to zero, which is a huge amount of flexibility. You traditionally have had these huge sunk costs that you've put in to building infrastructure and building out your data centers, that it was very hard to make the business decision to turn things off because of that fact. So those three things together, the digital engagement of everyone having a device on them at all times and using it and needing to have access to that data, the whole emergence of data science, data scientists, big data sets and big data technologies that allowed you to sort through that and do that. And then this desire to move from a very static, on-premise, lots of process data center to compute on demand are really what's been driving this this emergence of the reemergence of IT, I'll say, in this century. A similar analog happened in the previous century, right? So at the turn from the 19th century to the 20th century, there was a similar shift that happened with electricity. So if you were a manufacturing entity, in the early part of the 20th century, you most likely had an organization that was building and managing and running your electrical generation equipment, right? Because the most efficient way to bring power and do manufacturing was to use electrical tools. And the only way to have electricity at that point in time was to build your own electrical power plant. So manufacturers were building electrical dynamos and putting them into power plants, and you would have teams of people that would manage and maintain those. Over time, that role was taken over by utility companies, and they started to deliver that as a service as opposed to something you needed to bundle in capital costs into your manufacturing environment to do. Now, that's not to say that it's using the cloud is as simple as plugging something into the wall, right? In the same way that if you're building a modern manufacturing plant, you would not want this guy on the right out there wiring up your electrical into that plant, right? You still need standards, you still need architecture, you still need to design how you're going to use that electricity, where you're going to use that electricity, how much power amperage do you need. There's still a role for IT to play in this whole approach, but it's not building and maintaining the data centers. It's about how and where I'm going to use compute and storage on demand in order to serve my business, and do it in a safe way, not in a way that's going to endanger yourself or your data or your customers' data. So this was the traditional model for a long time with IT. This is a physical representation of or a modern day representation of a castle, right? This is a data center surrounded by a moat, essentially. In this case, the moat is not for protection of it, it's really for cooling of the data center. But I thought it was an interesting kind of visual play on this. But this is, how traditionally we've thought about data security problems when it comes to managing data. That the bad guys are on the outside and all the good stuff is on the inside. Our people, our employees, our data are all good and on the inside, and we need to build this perimeter fence around what we're doing to protect it. But the reality of that, even before the cloud, was not true, right? The reality of it was our networks were fairly porous. People could, in many cases could walk in off the street and plug into our network, et cetera. is good and bad actors inside the company, and you might have, you know, viruses inside that come in, or bad compute nodes or compromised compute nodes as well. You also have partners, right? You want to share data with other people, and you want to use data from other people as well. So not everything outside your walls is bad. A lot of times you want to collaborate with those external entities, right? So the reality is far more like this, which is that the perimeter is not a network perimeter anymore, right? So we have to stop thinking of the perimeter as in terms of the network, and start thinking of the perimeter in terms of identity. Who are these people and what can they do is the primary perimeter now, and that's much different. It looks much different than what it did before. So the critical ideas here is that, you know, the old way of thinking is really building the moat, following the process, and then specializing in skills. But we really want to get to is saying, hey, look, you know, the moat functionality doesn't work anymore. The build the castle function, you know, the build a castle model is not viable anymore, you know, in our environment. What we really need to do is focus on identity and access management as the boundary, right? Once you decide that identity and access management is the boundary, then that opens up a whole new world to you in terms of what you can do with automation and controls around that identity and perimeter. Secondly, it's not about following the process anymore. It's really about building a pipeline. So whenever you want to do something, it's not about ticketing into an individual who then sits in their queue for 2 weeks, and then, you know, when it's a couple hours before the deadline, then they go do that work, and something gets done and gets deployed and it moves into the next queue. Really what we want to do is build an automation pipeline. We want to build code that actually does that tasks, right? So as we can identify the repeatable items within our IT skills that we're doing, we need to have it built into our culture that as we find those things, we're building a pipeline so that we never have to do that again, or we only have to manage the exception. The other thing that's different kind of in this transform world is really around skills. So in traditional IT, everyone is focused on specializing in a very small area. You have your, you know, you have your networking guy, or maybe even, you know, at larger environments, you're going to have like someone that just does remote access, and someone that just does wide area networking, someone that just does kind of local area networking, right? You have all these very specialized skill folks. In the cloud, to be successful, you really need to be full stack. You need to understand network. You need to understand the compute layer. You need to understand the data storage layer. You need to understand how to bring these together, and you need to understand how to protect them with that IAM boundary to protect your data and your assets and your workloads that are running in cloud. It's really no different than what you were supposed to be doing on-prem. The difference is that with AWS, we now have the tools to do this programmatically, right? When we had things on-prem, the only tools that we had in our toolbox to protect things were to prevent access to them. Now we can manage and prevent access to them in a much more granular way using automation and tooling. That's going to be new to our teams. So let's talk a little bit about. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, you got over it now. You're moving to the cloud. How do the organizations typically move to the cloud? How does it work, right? So someone within an organization does a POC. They build an application. They show how quickly they could get that VM deployed, and they got the application up and running. It's a big success internally. So then they're like, hey, look, yeah, we're happy to share this. We're going to share it with, you know, some of the other teams that we have, and, you know, fast followers start to, you know, connect with that initial POC, and they start to share the environment. They start to do other things within that environment. Over time, that shared environment gets a bit messy, right? Because you've had a bunch of application teams essentially just doing their own thing. If they're doing it together inside of the same account, they start to collide with each other. And eventually you'll hit a point where one application collides with another. Someone makes a change out of band, or someone makes a change that breaks another application. And then what happens is IT gets involved, right? So now it's like, you know, IT gets involved, they come to the rescue. They're like, okay, we have a process for this. It's called ITIL. We're going to break up all these things that you're using that are all together. You know, I know you're using S3, and you're using EC2, and you're using whatever it is, DynamoDB behind the scenes or RDS behind the scenes. But we have different service teams for all those different things. So what we're going to do is put you back into the process, right? And so this is exactly kind of the wrong direction. If you have the right leadership within your organization, hopefully you won't go too far down this rabbit hole. What we really need, what the organization really needs at this point, is an enterprise architecture, right? They need a cloud enterprise architecture. They need a way to provide isolation between these different teams so that effects from one application cannot cascade into the effects of another. And Amazon provides awesome capabilities for this, both within one account, but also between splitting out many accounts. You can have a single AWS organization with, several hundred accounts. We have customers that have, over 1,000 AWS accounts that they manage under a single organization. They split out those different accounts and give each of those accounts access to that full stack of capabilities, but in a way that protects the enterprise. It has logging enabled. It has the proper security settings enabled. The network is configured appropriately based on their security setting. IT did work, but the work was really to program the capabilities around deploying that architecture in a way that the application teams could quickly get up to speed, get the value and the agility out of using the cloud that they were looking for when they were swiping their credit card, but while at the same time protecting applications from stepping on each other, and also preventing data loss and security issues within the environment. So given all of that, and this is the preamble's essentially done. Hopefully I built a case for change there. So once you build a case for change, you say, okay, we need to shift our organization. We need to shift our mindset from this traditional ITIL-based thinking around how do I manage individual pieces of infrastructure to how do I manage many environments. When you start managing the environments as when you start managing over 10 or 20 of these environments, you have to think about automation. So change is needed. I need to reskill my team, and I need to bring in people into that team that can do this work and can help us get there more quickly. So once you've decided that that's necessary, you really have to understand that change is all about people and getting them on board and getting them tooling and capabilities that can help them skill up and be successful in this new environment is critical to your business success, right? That's the fundamental thing. You'll never be able to hire enough people to solve this problem. You have to skill up your current team and bring in new people in specific areas in order to make this work. If you try and just kind of push the old aside and bring in all new, you'll end up doing more damage than good. So obviously we've been, I mentioned we started this process at my previous employer about 10 years ago. AWS has been around since 2006. So we're not the first ones to go through this. What I'm going to try and provide here today is some lessons learned from what I've seen in my own experience, as well as what I've seen working with other customers that are making this journey and helping them through the process. So I'm just going to quickly touch on them here, and then I've got a slide for each of these that I'll walk through. So first one is really fostering a culture of learning through doing, and that's critically important. I'll talk about that in a minute. Second one is really helping your organization mature through the use of a shared decision-making framework. We're also going to talk a little bit about kind of how you automate the busy work out of this environment. Like, have your people stop doing mundane tasks and have them start, building software that does mundane tasks. It's a lot more fun to build software that does mundane tasks than it does to do the mundane task itself. And then last, I'll talk about some ways that you can be open and public about what you're doing, so you can attract new talent to your organization and bring that in. So learn by doing. A couple of things that I've seen work at other places that have been very successful is one idea is that everyone gets a sandbox. And this is an approach where you give every IT employee a budget can be somewhere between $50 and $100 to run their own AWS account. and that account, they can try out different services. Amazon has incredible free service tier layer where, for almost every service, there's a free service tier that you can run that service for a year without incurring any cost. So if you have an AWS organization, you can spin up these accounts. You can give people these sandboxes. They can go off and try out these services, and then you can turn down those services when they're done, and at very little cost to the organization, but a huge benefit, right? The ability to get yourself hands-on with these tools and see what they actually do is incredibly empowering. It turns that fear factor of this is taking away my job to, hey, I can add a lot of value here, and I know how to discuss these things. I know how I can help formulate how we use these things to deliver value for the business. Is really the mindset shift that you want everyone to get, and having a personal sandbox that you can play around with and try with tools is really important to that. Second is having a research mindset. I've seen a couple organizations do this, and it's worked out really well, where they followed the approach of research institutions, where even to the point of giving titles to their employees, changing their employee titles to reflect this, where you had kind of your graybeards that are been around for a long time and really know what they're doing, and they're the fellows, the research fellows that are kind of dipping in and out between projects and kind of helping guide them in the right place. Then you have your kind of professors, people that have done this and have done it before at maybe at other organizations or in past roles, where they've actually done this stuff, and they can teach others how to go do these things. They can present their projects. They can share them internally, show the way of how they perform things. And then everyone else is kind of grad students, right? They're not students. I like to kind of paint that as like grad students, right? Because when you're a student, it feels more passive, right? I'm a student. I'm consuming all the time. I'm not adding back in. Whereas a grad student is much different in their approach. They're actually doing research. They're doing work. They're learning on the job, and oftentimes they're teaching their professors new ways, new approaches to do this. The ground is shifting so quickly in this space. AWS is releasing thousands of new features every year, and the best practices for using those features, for automating them, for getting value out of them, continues to change. And so, quickly the person that was the fellow or was the professor becomes the student for these new services if you're doing more with it. So I like to think of kind of the core team doing the work as those grad students who are trying to implement the best practices, learning, and then presenting back the research that they found on what's their thesis on how we should approach doing data pipelines with Terraform or whatever it might be, right? It adds back value into the organization, and it makes people feel both at the same time that they're learning, but they're also teaching and helping others with where they're going. So having that research organization mindset, thinking about problems in that way, and empowering everyone to be both a learner and a teacher can really do a lot to move your organization forward and engage people in the process of the change. The second thing I wanted to talk about that I've seen be successful is really helping the team with a continuous improvement framework, right? And so really when you're talking about continuous improvement, everyone goes, oh yeah, we need to continuously improve. It sounds like it's no nonsense, right? But actually doing it is a different thing. Some people focus in on Agile. Agile as a methodology is a great methodology for software development. It's not always super intuitive how to apply those same precepts to infrastructure, and especially to security around infrastructure, right? Which is kind of Turbot's specialty. So decision-making framework that we think works really well in the cloud space because of the dynamic nature of the cloud is called the OODA loop. The OODA loop was originally developed by, and I wish I have the name, the link, the Wikipedia links down there if you want to learn a little bit more about it. But it was originally developed by a fighter pilot who was trying to codify essentially the process that they used when they're dogfighting another opponent, right? And so the essential process is when you're flying the plane, you observe everything in, that you can within, this is all happening within a split second, right? So I'm observing where I am, what my speed is, what my altitude is, where clouds are, where the opponent is, what's their heading and orientation, et cetera. So you're observing all of that. You're then orienting yourself in that space. Like, where am I? What direction am I going? What's the state of the craft that I'm flying, et cetera. Once you've oriented yourself in the space, you need to decide what it is that you want to do, right? This is the most important thing. Am I going to turn towards them? Am I going to turn away? Am I going to, duck and cover? Am I going to fire? Like, what is the decision that you're going to make in terms of that? And then you act, and then you start the process again. And in a fighter pilot parlance, this is happening, every second, right? They're continuously observing, orienting themselves, making decision, acting, and then what did the opponent do, right? Because, I turn to the right, the opponent obviously observed me. Did they then change what they're doing, right? And a lot of times, what you're doing, just like in poker, the fact that that the opponent knows that like a lot of that plays into it. And it has great analogies to what we do in the cloud, especially in cloud security every day, where, I have customers with literally millions of AWS resources, right? So 1,000 AWS account with 1,000 resources, that's 1 million resources, right there. Every one of those resources, not everyone, but many of those resources are changing all the time. Within any given second, multiple resources are changing, right? Did they change because of a specific act? Someone configured that change? Did they change because a software execution changed them, which is the most likely scenario, right? So, a piece of software ran and decided that it, reached a threshold, and then it needed to spin up another VM in order to handle the load. In order to spin up that VM, a lot of things need to happen. A network interface needs to be deployed, an IP address needs to be assigned, et cetera. So you have all these resources that are just, moving all the time that you need to, manage. And so, having a process and methodology like this, where you can observe what's happening within the environment, then now that you can observe it, you can start to identify patterns, and you can say, okay, what is my posture, right? When I see this sort of pattern emerge, what is my posture? And then what is my policy around that? So if I see someone spin up a virtual machine and it has a public IP address, what should I do about that? Should I ignore it? Maybe I should ignore it because maybe it's in an account. This is where orientation becomes really important, because maybe that VM with a public IP address is in an AWS account that is serving a public website. And so it's perfectly appropriate for it to do that. On the other hand, if you've got a data set, an internal data set or an internal application that you're using, maybe that is completely inappropriate and you need to take an enforcement action or alert somebody that has occurred, right? So understanding what your policy is important, but also understanding how that policy differs within different environments and in different situations is important as well. So that observation, orienting yourself to, hey, I observed that this thing happened. What does that mean in context of this particular application that is that's involved there? And then what is it that I would want to do about that? Now, in a traditional, IT environment, what would happen is you'd fire off an alert. Someone would get an email. Then hours later, someone would log into a system, investigate what that email was about, and then make a decision on what needed to happen, right? Many times that decision's happening hours or days later than the initial alert came in. With the cloud, we have the opportunity to codify what the enforcement is or what the action is when I see that same pattern, right? So this gives you an incredible opportunity, having the decision-making framework, but then also having tooling around that gives you the ability to decide how to, manage your environments and really empowers your team that's managing this to do it at scale, right? Because that's essentially what we're talking about is we start building applications and those applications control their own infrastructure. The changes to those infrastructure are happening at a scale that human intervention is very difficult to monitor and manage, right? We need automated systems in order to do that. And so giving the decision-making framework as a starting point and then layering in tooling on top of that is super important. In this particular case, I'm showing a little bit of the automation capabilities that you can think about. When you're first new to AWS and you're using tooling and technology out there, you're going to be using the AWS dashboard, right? The web console that's deployed out there. Once you start using that, you start to go, oh, hey, I'm doing this thing over and over again. I want to improve upon that. You might start using the AWS CLI, right? A command line based tool in order to manage those. So you're moving up kind of the maturity curve in terms of how you're doing automation there. And then eventually you get to the point where I just want to do this all as code. I don't want to have manual interaction with these things at all, right? And that's where then you'll start using something like CloudFormation in order to predefine the configuration that will be deployed, right? It's in effect, all of these tools are doing the same thing, whether I click the button on the web console or whether I use the API and the command line tool, or whether I define it as code and then deploy that code. The effect is the same, which is that all of those things signal to AWS, hey, I would like this to change within my environment. And those things go change and are executed and within the model. So helping your team move through this maturity curve, giving the team members that are less familiar with cloud the GUI components that they can actually feel comfortable with looking and seeing and understanding how things run, letting them move up the maturity curve to things like the CLI, and then eventually to infrastructure as code. If you come in immediately and say, okay, everything must be through a pipeline, it must be infrastructure as code, and no one can touch the web console, it's going to limit your ability to bring your current team forward. They're going to have to go off and get AWS certified and have years of experience before they can come in and do that. If you want to bring up a team that's used to working with on-premise through this process, you need to help them through that learning curve by giving them projects to do where they can see the value of these tools for themselves. And that's the same thing for Turbot. So we feel the same way. We want folks new to the cloud security and governance space to be able to use our tools and get value out of them. So we provide the web-based console for teams that can get in, they can explore their governance posture against the accounts that they have listed. And then we also give you similar tools. We give you a Turbot CLI tool to do things to the CLI when you're ready for that level. And we also have a Terraform provider for Turbot that lets you configure Turbot as code, similar to how CloudFormation allows you to configure AWS resources as code, right? So having these kind of steps in place in order to do that are super important and will really help your team skill up and move into the space confidently, not feel like they're being left behind or they don't have the skills because they are not ready to immediately jump in, to the top level of that. My final piece of advice is really to be open. Especially, this is super important. It's actually important both for retaining talent and for attracting talent to your organization. Being open gives, when you have an audience for something, it inherently means you're more invested in it, right? If I'm just working on something on my own at my desk and I'm the only one that's ever going to see it, if I'm writing a piece of automation code and I'm the only one that's ever going to touch it, it's less impactful than if I'm sharing that with the outside world. I'm getting feedback on it, I'm improving it, I'm adding to the value. When you move into using cloud, you're very much in a community, right? You're 100% leveraging early on the work that other people have done and examples that they've provided and shown you how to use that. And it feels good to use those things to think up something new or to then share back what you did with them, it feels like you're contributing to that community. So things like participating in open source projects, things like, even some of your internal tooling that you may write and things like that, open sourcing those so that for most companies, those are, that's not a competitive advantage. I do have a couple banks that believe that their governance control framework is a competitive advantage to them over their peers. But for the most part, for most companies, these are things that you can freely share in terms of what's your approaches to doing this. And in doing so, people who are looking for other like-minded individuals who are going down this road will identify with that and will seek out jobs at your organization. And will also feel good to the people that are inside that they're able to share out. Similarly, speaking at conferences, give your team, I would rather have someone from my team go speak at a conference than attend a conference 100 times, right? Speaking at a conference, you get 10x the networking that you would if you just attend a conference. And you're an active participant in it. You're adding value to the conversation. The first one you do might be a little bit, might be a little bit nerve-wracking. But if you have people that are interested in doing this and you're not letting them do it because, for whatever, PR, reasons or whatever that might be internally, you're really losing a valuable resource, both to attract talent into your organization, but also keep those people happy that would like to share the work that they've been doing. And in a similar way, blogging about what you're doing, a lot of the leading minds in the security as code and governance as code, space are blogging, prolifically about it. Netflix shares open source projects and blogs about what they're doing in that space. Amazon shares everything that they do, including moving some of their, internal tooling and become products that we can then use. Blogging, speaking about these things, putting together a blog, even a short blog post, it takes a lot of work, right? So you have to give the team time and energy to do it and see value in it. And the value is really in what we're talking about. It's like putting together that blog post makes them sharpen their thinking about what it is that they're doing and provides a higher degree of, generally a higher degree of kind of doneness to that work than just getting over to the next ticket that they're working on. And so even if it's just blogging internally about what you've done and sharing that out with others, having one of the things we used to do is have a demo day every week where everyone would show what they were working on for the previous week. So the whole cloud team will get in the room, everyone will get up and spend 2 or 3 minutes and you kind of show the project that they had been working on over the last week and what they've done with that. Just that little bit of kind of show and tell brings so much, getting ready for that meeting. It creates a deadline, creates urgency. You want to show something cool to your teammates. And the same things apply if you share that with the outside world as well. So be as open as you can, minimally be open internally with your team and allow everyone to share everything inside. The more you can share outside, the more you'll be able to attract, I think, talent overall into your team. So with that, I'll pause here. Jon, do you want to throw it back to you or take questions now? Did you have
Actually, so this is a great time, David. That's really a lot of information there. I found the, what was the OODA loop? Or
yes.
OODA? Okay, that was actually interesting. That's something I'm going to bookmark and take a look at that one. So I appreciate you sharing that. I have one question before we pass it over to Austin, but then actually I have 2 questions. The second one's going to be a fun one for me here. The question I got for you is, what's an interesting cloud or automation project Turbot is working on today that helps you attract talent?
I think, I think one of the things that, the lesson that I just talked about as far as being open is a key one for us. We were because we were in the security space, we were very closed for a long period of time and closed source, and we didn't share a lot of what we were doing except with our customers. And we found just in the last year, we've opened up the Turbot Developer Kit. We call it the TDK. So if you go to github.com/turbot/TDK, that is essentially an open source library of things that we've built and things that our customers have built on top of Turbot to manage cloud security at scale. And that's been really successful for us, and just in terms of bring talent into the organization and people finding what we do in a more organic way as well.
Nice, nice. I really appreciate that. We're almost out of time for you. I really want to give Austin some time, but I got to talk about this last thing because I'm super proud of it. You know what? Just recently, what was it? Yesterday, actually, announced Turbot's AWS Outpost Ready designation and marketplace availability. First of all, I was a part of that. I knew what was going on, but you got to share it out. Give everybody a little bit of information. What does that mean for Turbot and AWS Outpost?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's awesome. We have we work with we work with customers in a lot of different fields, but having customers with really stringent regulatory and data protection requirements often means that that they don't feel comfortable necessarily moving data outside of their data centers. And Outpost is an incredible way to bring AWS compute and storage technologies into the local data center. Sometimes it's not even about protection. Sometimes it can be about if you have a large manufacturing environment and you need compute that's milliseconds away from like your manufacturing equipment, just the extra 5 or 10 milliseconds to get to the AWS data center might be impactful to your manufacturing. But having those capabilities on-prem, lets you use all of these automation tools that I was just talking about directly against that infrastructure that's now running in your local data center, right? So you have the benefit of both worlds. You have this programmable API where you can manage your compute and storage infrastructure, but you can then place that compute and storage infrastructure kind of at a place that makes most sense for you in terms of latency, et cetera. And Turbot, leaning into that, we want to give customers the ability to run our governance controls on top of those environments. So because we could never do that before for on-premise situations, right? Because every customer environment's a bit of a snowflake. If you go from one customer to another, they might be running different flavors of VMware, et cetera, or just their own homegrown stuff. There's no API, there's no consistent API level for us to hit against. But now with Outpost there, we're able to kind of extend the Turbot framework to run on those on-premise workloads as well.
Nice. So congratulations on that. I couldn't wait to actually come out so I can share that out. So I'm really, really impressed and proud of that one. Congrats.
Thank you.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time and an excellent presentation there. The next person I'd like to introduce is Austin Muller, Associate Vice President of AWS Technology Partners at Jefferson Frank. And before I turn it over to Austin, I'd actually like to mention that Austin and Jefferson Frank participated in my personal virtual career fair that I live streamed and held an event back in July. And that's where I had the chance to virtually meet Austin. So Austin, thank you so much. Why don't you come on?
Yeah. Hey guys, John, you hear me?
Yep, you're all
Great.
clear. I'm going to turn it over to you, turn my stuff off, and you have the floor.
All right, thanks guys. So as John mentioned, I am Austin Muller. I am a Associate Vice President here at Jefferson Frank. And for those of you that don't know who Jefferson Frank is or what we do, I would say we are a recruitment agency, but that would be selling us far short. So what we do is we specialize in working with companies who are in the AWS space, right? That's all we do. We work with organizations who are looking to hire AWS talent or work with candidates who are looking to find their next career in the AWS field. So we're very focused, we're very niche, and we're very, very specialized. Part of what we do is we do these webinars with various AWS technology partners. So this is part of our project and our way of adding value to the AWS community and the ecosystem out there. So real quick bullet points. There's more points I've got that I really want to tie into David's presentation, but the general overview of who we are and what we do, right? Again, the main core money generating part of our business is helping companies find talent that they need and helping that talent find new organizations and new places to work where they're going to be happy. So, quick overview of us here. Again, we are part of a larger company known as Frank Recruitment Group, and the Frank and everything. And they recruit for, the other brands recruit for other types of technologies, again, very specialists in their areas as well, with focuses on things like Mason Frank focus on Salesforce, Nelson Frank on ServiceNow, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we are also a AWS technology partner. I think that's something that's worth noting. We have our own little recruitment platform that companies can use to go and look at talent proactively. And we're also re:Invent sponsors. We sponsored it at first back in 2018, where I was attending the conference, had a lot of fun then. We sponsored it again last year. Don't know how we're going to sponsor it this year. It's going to be very interesting to see how that goes down, but we will be, if capable, sponsoring again as a silver sponsor in 2020. So looking forward to that. Really, this is kind of a quick overview of us globally. There's right now, there's over 20 locations that have a Jefferson Frank office in it. We break our, as you can tell, John introduced me. I run our technology partner division for the South and Central regions of the United States. But we cover the globe. So how do we work with a business? I think this is the most important part. I'm going to start tying it back into some things that David said. And this is where you're going to kind of see how we're different from your standard recruiting agency, right? Most agencies are going to come in at that third stage, that hiring process stage. What we like to do is come in far earlier than that. And it's part of what we do a lot of with the AWS Activate customers as well. But every customer we work with, we try and take this approach of the first thing we have to do is understand who is the customer. Where are they in their cloud journey? And then more importantly, where are you trying to go? Well, what is the end state you're looking to achieve? And what are those goals or milestones you've got along that journey? And then 2 or 3, really, what are the roadblocks? Well, what's stopping you from getting to where you want to be? What is preventing you from reaching that end state? And then what resources are you currently utilizing internally, not only from a technical perspective, but also an outside perspective? Are you working with any other consulting firms? Are you working with other technology partners? Who internally is helping you on AWS? And that gets us to the next big point. It's the right people in the right places. And I think David made a really powerful point about this earlier. You have to be able to, you can't just hire all these people into your organization, expect it to work, especially if you're an established company. You have to be willing to train and upskill some of your internal people, right? So you can look at it as hiring teachers versus hiring students, right? So the big thing we do is we want to sit down with you and understand, okay, who do you have in your business right now? And you can sit there and say, well, we don't have anybody who understands AWS at all. And that's perfectly fine. But who do you have in your organization that you think has the technical ability, the desire, really, the gumption to go out and learn about AWS, to be mentored by somebody? You're going to have, hopefully, a lot of students inside of your organization that are going to want to learn from some very senior teachers or very knowledge teachers, either that work at Amazon directly or that you're going to hire into your business. So we try and evaluate, okay, who are the people that you're going to train up, and where are you going to be lacking in areas and the people that you need to bring on, and how can we help you get there? And that's when we finally get to the hiring process, right? What resources do you need to bring on? When do you need to bring them on into your organization? And then putting the whole hiring process in place with you, from finding the candidates for you, setting up the interviews, and actually conducting the hiring process, putting out an offer letter, getting them onboarded. But then this is where we continue on after most agencies kind of up and leave. It's growth and retention planning, right? We place a DevOps engineer. We want that DevOps engineer to work for you or work in your organization for the foreseeable future. And the turnover in the IT industry is very high, even higher in AWS. Most candidates are only in the job that they're in for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. Somebody who's been at a company for 3 years or longer is considered a long tenured employee when it comes to AWS skills. So these people are expensive to train. They're expensive to hire to begin with. And, most of them command a pretty generous salary. So what can you do to abate the cost of having someone who knows your business inside and out and is very skilled from leaving your business? We try and help people with that and through growth and retention planning. And that really kind of ties into a lot of things that David was talking about earlier. So these are kind of some key points that we've got for helping automation to attract and retain good people. This is the first point is really big to me, right? 20% of candidates surveyed through our salary survey that we do every year mentioned they're dissatisfied with the training and development that their current company offers them. All right, and that's, you also got to understand in our salary survey, there'll be a link you can find it on later. We group it into 3 fields, which is satisfied, neutral, and dissatisfied. So if you say 20% are dissatisfied, there's about another 35-40% that say they're neutral. That's not a feeling you want to have in your company. Saying, hey, I'm neutral towards how my employer treats me from a training and knowledge upskilling perspective, or I'm dissatisfied. It's not a great thing. And the ability to move forward and work with new technologies, as David mentioned, everybody gets a sandbox, right? Everybody should have the ability to go and get training through AWS or other sources like A Cloud Guru or whoever else you want to go to, and upskill themselves and then be able to experiment with it. It's absolutely crucial for employee buy-in. So that's one area. And also too, if you look at this, the top two reasons for candidates state, when we're talking to them about leaving their current job, there's two things that they go over. And one of them is we're working with older technology or outdated methodologies. And that's one. And the other is their lack of culture of innovation, which kind of goes hand in hand. And again, that ties back to everybody gets a sandbox. It also ties back to, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff manually here. There's not a lot of automation that's built into our processes. There's not a lot of thought into what we're doing from a cloud infrastructure perspective or an enterprise architecture perspective. It's all kind of haphazard. And it's a big turnoff for a lot of people because they know there's better ways of doing things. And, I'm sure there are business barriers that prevent a lot of things from changing, but it's the companies that adapt and are capable of getting around those barriers or breaking those barriers down that are going to be the best places to work for someone. And then the other thing, finally, it's 49% of employees say that at their current company, their prospects for career growth are either limited or neutral. So half of the employees feel that they don't have the opportunity to grow in their current business. And that means both professionally, so going from a mid-level engineer to a senior engineer to an architect. It also means from a technical perspective or a knowledge perspective. I feel like I am pigeonholed into a role and my company doesn't want me to learn more because they need me where I am. Because if I leave, they have no one with that knowledge. I'm the only one that knows our processes in and out. And it's not automated. I manually do a lot of the work. And that's a big barrier a big limitation. And it has actually an adverse effect. Yes, that employee might be crucial to your business, but he can't go anywhere or she can't go anywhere, and they're going to end up leaving the company altogether instead of you giving them better opportunities, allowing them to work with newer technologies and automate their way into a new position. So those are some key points kind of to hit back on what David was presenting on around those points. And kind of the rest of it, it's very general overview of the type of stuff that we do or when it comes to recruiting for these types of professionals and what types of roles we typically fill, the types of skill sets we're generally asked to find. Again, it kind of covers the whole gambit, right? And companies can be very strong on the infrastructure side and the DevOps side, but they're just getting into the data field, kind of going back to where are you in your cloud journey. It doesn't have to be that we've got to start working with you from day one of your AWS journey. It can be, hey, we're a very established organization, but we don't know how to sort through our data. We're trying to get into data science and machine learning processes using SageMaker, right? We can help any type of organization get through any part of their process. So this kind of covers the whole shebang of the roles that all of our teams cover and recruit for. And then, our clients are a priority, right? So there's a couple testimonials here. But, I think the big thing is we try to be, as Amazon, it's also one of their big points is, customer comes first or it's customer centric. And we try to be that way as well and take a very consultative approach with the businesses that we work with, as well as the candidates, right? And making sure they understand the hiring market and they understand what's going on out there. It's very important for us that we take the consultative road and that we show people, this is the best way to do things, obviously within the constraints of your business, or this is the best type of opportunity for you. So we really do try and take a consultative approach. We've worked with companies large and small, Fortune 50 all the way down to small mom and pop shops and startups just starting out, mainly through the Activate program. But there's a whole lot of things that we cover. So really, that's it for me, John. I'll kind of give you the reins back, so to speak. But that is overall everything that we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that one. I actually do have to note that I just noticed on that slide, the very second to the last slide, Mr. William Chin, I actually worked with him personally at CDI, so I know him. I might actually have to text him after this conversation. Hey, listen, your name's on the slide and taking a screenshot. So that was awesome. We've only got a little bit of time here for about 2 questions. We're going to round it out with Austin, and I'm going to put him on the spot with a couple of questions, and then we'll say our thank yous and get things rolling here. So, Austin, real quick, what are the biggest barriers that you see preventing companies from having a culture of innovation or moving more towards that automation process?
Sure. So I think the biggest barrier really, it comes down to a hesitancy, right? People are hesitant because they don't know where to start or they don't know where to go from where they are currently. That really is the biggest jam. that people run into. And I think the other thing too is, and David kind of brought this up in his presentation, is people are worried they're going to automate themselves out of a job, right? That they're going to do this and their job's just going to be eliminated, when that's actually probably the furthest thing from the truth. The only thing you're going to do is you're going to learn a new skill and become more valuable in a different way than what you're traditionally used to. So I think the biggest thing that's the culture blocker for innovation is, oh, we've always done it this way, or that really isn't it. A lot of companies now understand, especially with COVID, we've seen a lot of it changing as companies understand we have to be able to adapt. It's now more of a, how do we go to where we need to be? I don't understand what's the first step. How do I start this journey? How do I start this process? And then people going, well, okay, if we do this, am I going to just, run myself out of an employment opportunity here? Those are typically the two big things that we see, and both, we can obviously help with both. But I would say automation, it's just a new skill. It's a new tool in the toolbox for you to use rather than, eliminating yourself from an opportunity.
So I actually agree with you so much on those last two statements. And that's one of the things that I always did within a company. And this is a personal opinion of my own, is that when I was asked to automate something, I would do it, only for the simple fact is that I would find a way to do it so I could do other things, so I could learn new skills, so I can play around with new things. I became more valuable by automating that, and now my time has been spent on new projects and new things to develop. So the company has more time to work on that. And the old mantra is, this is the way we've always done it, is that you're kind of used to just clicking and doing those buttons. Automate it, learn some new stuff, and go forward with that one. So that's really good. Does resonate really well with me.
Good.
You know what? We're pretty much out of time here, Austin. I really apologize. I would have hoped to give you another question for that one. I don't want to cut you off or anything. You did mention growth and retention, but in the end there, in one of your slides, you really talked about, what Jefferson Frank does then as they go above and beyond for that one and kind of hold on to that growth and retention plan. So I really appreciate that. Those are some key things for you. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for joining us on this one, David. Thank you. There you go. Perfect timing. You were reading my mind, like, hey, pop on there. David, Austin, thank you so much. I'm going to leave the last few words for you guys. David?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity and attention from everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I guess the best email for that would be cto@turbot.com. Or david@turbot.com.
Nice, giving out his personal one there, Fred. So feel free to email him. He will respond. Austin?
Yeah, no, I think the same line as David. Thank you guys for attending. Thanks for everybody. Obviously, we recorded this session too, so it'll go out to plenty of people all over the internet. So thank you for taking the time. Again, if you do have any questions, there's anything you want, obviously Jefferson Frank's website is probably the best place to go. We can route you in the right direction. But my personal email will be attached to the follow-on documents with everything. So really appreciate everybody's time, and thank you so much for attending.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, night, or wherever you're at.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.